Welcome to Season 6 of Business Mentorship, Keepin' It Real. Introducing corporate leaders who have taken the leap to business owner, introducing their great idea in our guest blog, found on shareyourstories.online. Our guest joins us from Hamilton, Ontario. Heather Fontez is a business owner who has many years of experience in the hospitality industry, with a master's in mental health psychology, who's taken the leap to self-employment. Let's find out why Heather has taken her corporate experience and crossed the bridge into entrepreneurship with her husband in an entertainment services business. It's my pleasure to introduce and welcome Heather.
Hi, Trish. How are you?
Well, when I was looking at your story and rereading it this morning before we came online, I thought, okay, this girl has really got it happening, because the two of you took a huge leap of faith and moved from overseas, right?
Well, I'm originally from England, UK, and but I met my husband here, and we were living in Toronto for about 8-9 years. But we recently, about 5 years ago, we moved to Hamilton.
So how does one go from a master's in mental health psychology into the hospitality industry and now into the entertainment services business?
Yeah, that's a very frequent question that I get. So back in the UK, I did my undergrad in psychology. I actually took about 3.5 years and went traveling around the world, which is what brought me to Canada originally. And then I just kind of slipped into hospitality, like I think a lot of people do when, they just want to make a bit of extra money on the side. And I very quickly just started working my way up in the ranks, getting more responsibilities. And I was very fortunate enough to be the general manager of some fantastic locations in Toronto. I opened up Planta as the general manager. Kelly's Landing, which is right down by Union Station, a huge mammoth restaurant. So I got some really great experiences, but I always had a passion for psychology. So I decided to do my master's of psychology online, mental health psychology. And after the 4 years of doing that whilst being a full-time general manager, I decided that, very different career paths, and there is a lot of mental health within the hospitality industry, which I'm sure, anyone who's worked in it can agree with. And I actually saw a lot of benefit to my training to apply firsthand as a leader. And, leaders sometimes used as a word, sometimes people prefer, different variations of it. But I'd worked so many places in hospitality where my manager was just not the best person in, high stress situations. And that's very much what that environment is. So I felt very fortunate to give my team a more level-headed approach when things are getting a bit crazy in the restaurant. And so that's kind of how the transition happened to hospitality from my undergrad and graduate.
Well, what's really interesting is I like the fact that you've partnered in this business with your husband.
Yes.
So because he has a love for music and has been a DJ, right?
Yeah, he's been a full-time DJ for about 10, nearly 15 years now, but he's been a lifelong musician. So he's a fantastic singer. He plays the drums, piano, all types of instruments. And he's been very fortunate to, have music as his full-time career for many years now. And it was a thought that just kind of happened overnight. It actually happened whilst we were on vacation. We'd never discussed working together before. He'd always kind of hinted, I think you would be great at owning your own business, because I'd amassed a lot of skills as, a general manager, a director of operations, a VP of operations. And we just had this conversation, and it was like a brainchild. And we were like, let's do it. So it's a very spontaneous decision. And the following week, I quit my job as VP of operations. And that day I registered, we were a partnership at that time. We registered a partnership the same day and just got the ball rolling.
Wow, that's really quite a story. Normally people mull it over, right? We sort of mull over that, walking across the bridge from corporate to self-employment. But it sounds like the two of you went full steam ahead. You said, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, I think it was such an easy decision because we both have very, very high standards. And that was one of the kind of sticking points within the corporate world for me, is that I worked very, very hard to the point of burnout of many times.
Mhm.
And I always tried to manage that the best I could. But as soon as, if you come into I'm sure those people agree with this, if you come into a corporate job at a high level trying to impress people, that kind of becomes your standard. And more responsibilities are added on top of that, on top of that. And if you dip below that, all of a sudden, oh, you're not performing as well. Like, no,
Right.
I'm performing above the standard.
Yeah.
So I think just in a massive, all of that pressure and just all of the understanding of, well, the amount of work I was putting into the corporate world, if I was to put that into our own venture, and then Brian's like, he is such a passionate musician, but also passionate about everything he does creatively. I was like, we have very high standards together. So we felt very confident that it was something that we could do and succeed at.
So do you each stay in your lane? So tell us a little bit about how that partnership works, because most often we hear statistics that, especially people who live together and work together, that creates a huge amount of stress sort of off scene. When you're working, it's one thing, but when you're sitting down and having dinner, it's a whole other situation. So do you stay in your own lane, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate because of the dynamic of what his role is as the musician and my role is kind of the operations person. They're very, very different. So
Mhm.
he's our number one DJ that performs at events. He helps source and communicate with our talent because he has all that knowledge of the music side of things. And then for me, I'm doing the finance, marketing, the client communication, all of the like admin stuff,
Sure.
preparing event details and then giving it to our talent on the day to use for reference. So we have very separate kind of responsibilities. We it's nice to have that other person if you have questions or guidance, like how you would normally in a workplace. The only thing that kind of overlaps a little bit is we're both very creative. So when it comes to anything that's visible online, our website, our logo, all of that, we did ourselves and we did it combined. So I mean, I think going into it, that was the one thing that we were like, that could cause a little bit of not friction, but
Friction.
some harder conversations because we both have different styles. And
Sure.
yeah, so but we've really communicated well and it's been fun up until now. We're about a year and a half in and we haven't had any challenges really so far.
So where do you see the future of your industry? Because we've come out of a time where people were not able to sort of
Mhm.
get out and enjoy and socialize, and now I think everybody's got all this pent up energy, and we want to get out there and we want to meet people and have
Yeah.
parties and go to events. So how are you finding the economics of your industry? Do you see it in a growth mode?
Absolutely. I was a director at a banquet hall during the pandemic. And, for the first, I think, 6 or 8 months of my role in that job, we didn't even have one wedding, one event because we weren't allowed to. And then, it started at
Right.
a 20-person wedding, 50-person wedding. So I've seen kind of what an event industry is like when it's forced to be shut down. And then on the flip side, when we could start to open back up, not only was there the backlog of all the events, but I think there was such a thirst for like human connection and celebrating these really special moments in people's lives with family and friends. And, with our company, that's one of the things that we're really passionate about is that we want to make sure that the client not only has like a seamless journey with us as far as communication, they don't have to second guess anything, but they're going to have the best time and the end of the day they're going to have all these memories of the fun
Right.
dance floor and the energy that we provide. So
Right.
that's really special.
So how have you found the marketing? Because are people finding you, or do you find that you're still doing sort of the push marketing campaigns where you're letting people know where you are and what you do? Because clearly you can work at any venue. You
Yeah.
just have to make the connections with the venue owner or the facilitator that may be helping them host the event. So is push marketing still part of your plan at this point?
um to be completely honest, it hasn't really been a huge part of our plan at all. We've been very fortunate, I think, because we came in with some great connections into starting the company. Um,
Right.
in all my previous roles, I've always ensured that I've made connections with my vendors that I work with. So it was very natural that anytime, for instance, if we have an event, I always reach out to the photographer, the videographer, the planner, and I introduce ourselves, because at the end of the day, that's a very stressful day for everyone to be working on one job. Often it's a wedding, which it's, someone's most special day of their life.
Sure.
So just kind of going that extra mile, I feel has really helped us as far as like marketing, that we get a lot of word of mouth referrals.
Referrals, yeah.
Yeah, so I love data and I love analytics. So we actually keep track of, every inquiry that comes in and where they heard about us. And I would say maybe only about 20% is online search. The rest is all referral and word of mouth, or we met them in person at a previous event.
Sure. Well, that's a really wonderful point, because I think sometimes when we start new businesses, we're frantically trying to build a network of people that we can collaborate with. And it sounds like you've really got a wonderful model connecting with, various other folks who are also involved in the same event, so
Yeah.
that you can kind of refer each other for jobs in the future, which I'm sure is just as important for them as it is for you, right?
Yeah, it's really important as well. I mean, we call them like trusted vendors. Like we know their quality is as good as ours. So
Right.
it's really exciting when we find out, last minute that, oh, we're working on the same job together. But especially if we're giving that referral, just knowing that the day is going to be very smooth sailing, because we're working with people who we know take it as seriously as we do and have fun as well with it.
So did you have a strategic plan? So clearly, one of the things that folks are always saying is, when I started my business, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I didn't really write too many things down. I kind of wanted to go with the flow. Now,
Yeah.
with your background being very corporate and being very strategic, did you actually sit down and create a business plan, or did you let it sort of go with the flow?
When we first started, so it was October 2023 when I first like registered the business and got the ball rolling. I knew a lot about running a business, and I knew what it took. Like I knew how to create a budget, how to manage a P&L, like all the fun stuff.
Right.
And then, yeah, that's debatable.
The stuff that's very dry in the background.
I know, I know. So I knew all of that stuff, but I didn't know what it was to be an entrepreneur. And you don't know what you don't know. So I really wanted to absorb as much information. So I used the resources within our community, which I am so grateful for. The Small Business Centre in Hamilton, the YWCA with their Power Up program. And I really absorbed as much information as I could to understand what is that little bit that I'm not aware of as an entrepreneur, which I knew as a senior level executive, but what
Sure.
was that little bit that I didn't know? And from that, was how I was able to plan out a little bit about how the business structure would be. And also early on adopting the going to the YWCA Power Up program, you actually work through a whole business plan together.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah, so it's a 14-week program, and we're very fortunate at the end of that to have a business plan there ready for you.
So at least you've got some sort of template that you can sort of use and morph. I always call them living documents, right?
Yeah,
Because sometimes what we think we know when we start out starts to change a little bit as the months and weeks sort of progress. So I call them a living document. And I think that's
I
really
like that.
great, because doing that together with a group of people also
Mhm.
can probably give you some great ideas in the room.
Oh yeah, and you learn so much from others. And
Right.
the nice thing about a lot of the community ventures that I joined was that everyone had a different, a different industry they were in, a different time they were at in their business. Maybe they were, trying to expand, or maybe it was still a brainchild and they weren't quite sure what they wanted to do. But you learn so much from each individual. And, I think that's the power of community as well, is just,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
just absorb so much. And I'm very grateful for that.
So would you say that you've ever had, is there anyone that you've emulated in the industry, or have you had a mentor that you kind of have looked up to and said, yeah, that's, I want to be that person when I grow up, kind of thing, when you take a look at their skills and experience and their success in the community, is there anyone that comes to mind?
To some degree, like all of my mentors and all my previous roles have had an element of that. But this may sound really bad, but I've actually learned more from what their, shortcomings were,
Right.
and to think I want to do better. And
Right.
I think for me, that was the biggest leap from being, a corporate employee to an entrepreneur, is that I want to do better. And for me at the time, we just purchased our first home like 4 or 5 years ago. And it felt very much like the same feelings back then. I was like, why am I paying a landlord rent when I could be putting the money into my own mortgage and owning this house myself? It started towards the end of my corporate career feel the same. Why am I giving all of my skills, all of my time, all of my health to a company which I'm replaceable tomorrow, when I could be investing that in mine and our future with my husband? And that was a very big, like, aha moment,
For
which
sure.
led us to opening the business.
So taking a look at, you've got a year and a bit in, so you've clearly been achieving success. You've got some wonderful referrals. You've got this template that you're sort of using, and perhaps every once in a while you revisit.
Mhm.
In the next sort of 12 months, do you have any really major goals? Are you going to be doing anything differently in your business in the near future?
Yeah, absolutely. I love goal setting. So we're always kind of having those conversations between the two of us. And I think we have a very exciting year ahead, because we have, in the last few months, we've secured 6 preferred vendorships at venues, which means that all of those venues, we're now kind of their go-to entertainment service, which we're very fortunate. So there's a little bit of unknown about what the upcoming year and the year after will look like as far as business and the amount of work coming in. So, I think the first goal is, towards the end of the year, we'll probably have to start hiring some people to support as far as administrative wise.
Mhm.
And the other goal is, how else can we lean into our passions? And Brian, like I mentioned, is a fantastic musician. And whilst we work with many other bands that we book out, we would actually like to create our own band on the Lake Live. And Brian would probably be the vocalist of that band, and we'd, leverage all of the wonderful musicians in the area.
For sure.
So that's a really exciting goal that we're starting to work on.
Well, I think you've given our viewing and listening audience, who may be in a situation where they're thinking, wow, that's an awful lot to accomplish in a year and a half. I mean, you've kind of crossed the bridge from corporate into entrepreneurship, and you really hit the ground running. And it sounds like you've got some really wonderful things in the future. So kudos to you and your husband for, in one week, flipping that dial and making those decisions and going and pursuing your dreams. So congratulations to you both.
Thanks so much, Trish.
Now, one of the things that we do in the guest blog is we ask folks to share 3 words of advice. So what I'd like you to do is wrap up our conversation today by sharing with our viewing and listening audience, why is passion, integrity, and self-worth important to you in your business?
Absolutely. So passion's really important, because I feel that whatever you do that you have passion in, it's going to come through you. And I think you really have to trust in your own abilities to achieve the things that you're passionate in. I can't foresee anyone succeeding if they're not passionate about it.
That's true. That's
Put it
true.
that way. For integrity, I mean, that's a very commonly used term, but I think it summarizes more so the meaning that knowing your own self-worth and being true to that. So don't second guess yourself. If you feel like you can do it, do it. If you need to make a decision which might be tough for someone else, if it's the right thing for you and your business, you have to make that decision. And then the final one is self-worth. So I think everyone in every situation can agree with this, but don't jeopardize your health for something that at the end of the day might not be important. So really kind of the work-life balance, but making sure that you're eating healthy, getting exercise, getting sleep. But sometimes it's a slippery slope. So just kind of being very mindful of things. If you're feeling overwhelmed, take a step back and understand why, and what can you do to remove that for yourself before it gets too late.
Well, I think you've given us some great advice, and you've shared some wonderful experience. So we're certainly looking on keeping in touch and watching as your careers continue to take off. So kudos to you both. And I'm sure in a couple of years we'll get together and you can give us some updates on that wonderful plan.
Thank you so much for your time, Trish, and I really appreciate the platform that you've created for us to have these conversations.
Yeah, it's my absolute pleasure. I know that everyone in our viewing and listening audience is going to be able to relate. So thank you so much for joining me today for this edition of Keeping It Real. introducing you to the person behind the logo. If you'd like to connect with our guest, you're going to find Heather's contact information in the description portion below. I'm Trish Tonai, author, artist, and the founder and host of the series. And we invite you to share your business story. Just visit our website at shareyourstories.online and subscribe to our channel, Business Mentorship, Keeping It Real. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting you next time when we share another great idea.